Okay, this is November 21st, 2020, and this is a documentary of my life. So I was born in 1924 on May 30th in Clairton, Pennsylvania. I was there for 1 year after I was born, and my parents moved to a little town of El Rama in Pennsylvania, not too far from where I was born. It was out in the country, and we had a large home. It was 8 rooms and a big reception hall, a large front porch, a back porch. We had property with fruit trees and grapevines, and it was a nice neighborhood. My father made a large garden, cleared the area around our property and made a large garden, and we had plenty of food that was prepared and canned in the winter. And we went out, the children. I have to go back to where the children were born. I was number 5 of the 9 children. So Anna Grace and Ethel were the oldest girls. And then there was Dan, and I have to put in here, Dan just celebrated his 100th birthday on about 4 weeks ago. And he's still doing good. He cuts grass and makes garden. And Dan was the 3rd child, and then James was the 4th, and he went into the war. He and Dan both went into the war, and James was killed when he landed on one of the beaches over in one of the islands, and he was killed. Dan came home. After Dan and Jimmy were born, my mother and then I came into the view on May 30th, 1924. And I was the baby for 5 years, and everyone in the neighborhood called me Baby Cochran. In the meantime, Mom got pregnant again, and she had Naoma. And then 2 years later, she had Lois. And 2 years later, she had George. And then 2 more years, she had Bob. So there was 9 of us. And we had enough room to move around in, and had a large field in front of the house where we played ball. And in the winter, we made snow trails and so on. And besides the 9 children and my mother and dad, my aunt and her son came to live with us, and my grandfather. So there was all of us together in this house. My aunt, she lost her husband, and she had her son with her, and he was the same age as I was. we managed to get along just fine. The bedrooms weren't as heated as the downstairs, and you piled on blankets. The house was big. Now, not ceilings like these or anything, but just the rooms themselves were big. The downstairs, the front entrance hall, it was a room actually, and you had your clock there and other pieces, and the stairs went up from the entrance hall up to the second floor, and then you had the attic, and you could also use that for sleeping in the summer. But in the winter, the attic would be way too cold, you know. The boys slept up there a lot of times in the summer. They'd like to be up there and carry on. Well, that was another thing. Mom put up with them carrying on in their bedroom, and they would be wrestling and jumping, and the bread would fall down. All the slats would fall out of the bed. My father was a bricklayer at this Clareton steel mill, and he worked there up until the Depression, and his work was very, very sparse because of the Depression. And he got sick and had lobar pneumonia, and that took his life. He died, and he died when I was 12 years old. And of course the rest, as they went along. And my mother took in sewing for people. She baked goods and sold baked goods and anything that she could to make a few dollars. My grandpa was a paper hanger, and he would do work for the neighbors and people in town, and he would make a few dollars hanging paper. And it was, the Depression was a very, we children didn't really realize the extent of the Depression. We knew that we didn't have some of the things other people did. When winter came, the boys we lived near the railroad tracks. Dan and Jimmy and Grandpa used to go down to the railroad. When the railroad trains came through with coal on them, they used to go down and climb on the freight cars and throw coal off on the ground, and lumps of coal, and then they would go back down and pick it up and bring it home. We had a big furnace, but we couldn't afford the fuel to operate it all the time. So we had fireplace in the dining room. And we used fireplace, and we'd put a small fire in the furnace, and it would warm up the house somewhat. When we could afford coal, we'd get a load of it, and they would come and dump it by the cellar window, and we had a large coal pile then, and you went down and you put coal in the furnace when it needed it. we had all the food we needed. There were things that came up, shoes and clothing, and for that many kids, it was kind of hard, but we managed. Mom managed to make a few dollars here and there, and we didn't pay any rent. The house that we had belonged to a gas company, and they left my dad, and Mom moved in there, and then after my dad died, Mom couldn't afford to pay, but nobody did anything about it, you know. And so we were there, we were in that house until I was 17 years old. And one of the things about the home was there was no electricity. Back then, there wasn't electricity in all the homes. A lot of them had gas lights, and that's what we had. We had oil lamps that you put oil in it, and it had a wick that you wound up, and you lit the wick, and that's made your light for you to see. And then and they also had the gas lights were installed, and they had what you called a mantle, and it was nothing more than like a bubble, like this big around, that fit on the base of it, and you screwed that in, and you had to be careful because if you touched it, it would disintegrate. And once you lit it with a match, you would turn on the gas and light it, then you turned it down to where you wanted it. But if you touched it a little bit with the matchstick, it would just fall apart. And it wasn't the best light in the world. And we did our homework by lanterns and gas lights. So, you know, we didn't know any different. And most of the people around us, finally, they did bring electricity into the area. Papa, my grandpa, he managed to string up a light from outside. He hooked on to the electric himself and put a bulb down from the ceiling, hung the wire down, put a fixture on it and a bulb, and that's how we saw. We didn't have the clothing. We didn't go to the stores, and we didn't go to the stores and buy clothing. My mother sewed all of our clothes, all the girls. She made all of our clothes. She even made our underwear. And we had chickens, and she bought chicken feed, and the chicken feed came in floured cotton bags. And my mother took those cotton bags and washed them up, and she made our underwear out of that. And you might go out somewhere with flour written across your back end. but it was good, strong food, clothing, and shoes was the hardest part because you had to have the money to go get the shoes. And I know I was very hard on shoes. And I spent most of the summer in my bare feet. So, but one winter I didn't have. My shoes were just so bad I couldn't go to school. They were just torn up, and the sole came off of them, and I couldn't wear them to school, and so my brother Jimmy was sick and couldn't go to school. So Mom said to me, Helen, the only way you can go to school is if you wear Jimmy's shoes. Oh, I probably was 8 or 9. And of course, I didn't want to do it, but I did. And naturally, I got to school. Some of the kids, that noticed it, that they were boys' shoes, and they made fun of me. And one day I had holes in my socks, and they always pointed that out. It was hard, but I wasn't the only one. There were other kids that were in worse shape than I was, so I never didn't let it bother me. And then it was those days, school days were. I enjoyed going to school. We walked to school, which was probably halfway around your place here to get to school. And in the winter, that was deep snow, and it was a rough trip. But we managed. We had warm clothes. Mom made sure we had coats, and she had gone to the attic to make me something. I had grown out of mine, and she took my one grandmother's coat that my aunts had given Mom, and then she tore it apart and made me a dress out of it. And one other coat, she made me a plaid jacket and bought me snow pants and made me an outfit. And it was just, you would have thought it come from the store. Yeah. So anyway, those are some of the things that you went through. And playing outside, we had this field. We played ball. We played everything was done outside. You invented your own entertainment, and so we used to play Fox and the Geese, which is in the snow. You made a big circle, and you made it like spokes in a wheel, and someone stood in the center. The one that was in the center, and they would take off running, and everyone else would try to catch them and tag them, and so we had a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun doing that. And the one big tree had a section of it where the center of the tree went up. It went up, way up, but one big branch went out this way. And when you went up the tree, there was just a level spot. You could just sit down there and play. It was really a beautiful tree. It was. And we put ropes on that and made swings and all of that sort of thing. And you didn't get to go out. You didn't go out and see much. When my father was living, before he died, we had his first car. His first car was what they called a touring car, and it had the front and back seat windows. No built-in windows. It had windows like when we went to my grandmother's on Thanksgiving and it was real cold. We wrapped up in blankets in the back seat. There was only 5 of us then. No heat, no. And the when you took off, there were celluloid. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. It's like plastic. They were celluloid windows, and they were built to fit the window, but they didn't fit in. They just came down and closed that area, and it had a little long thing, and you turned that to lock it, and that was the windows for the car. And we got along just fine because we were all bundled up. And that car, then my dad ended up with, he bought a Model T. And we still had that when my dad died. It was in the garage, and Mom sold it to one of my dad's friends. And so she didn't drive and never probably thought she would want to, I guess. And he used to take us out to the airport. We had a little airport, and he used to take us there just to watch the airplanes take off and come in. And he'd every once in a while he'd say, well, let's go take a ride at the airport. And we'd go. And talking about planes, there were planes, but you didn't see planes like you do today. And when we would be outside playing, occasionally a plane would come over the mountain and up, high enough. But it was a 2-wing plane, a bottom one and a top one. That was the first plane I ever saw, two-wing plane. And then, of course, things got a little, went on and on and on to what it is today. No, Anna Grace, she hurt her back. She fell off of the swing we had tied to the swing. And we built steps up the bank where the tree was. They cut steps in the bank. And Anna Grace went off and she lost her grip and fell and hurt her back. They thought for a minute she might have broke it, but she didn't. She was okay. But we used to climb them and sit up in that tree. And and I know Dan and Jimmy were at odds a lot of times. Dan was a big tease, and they got Jimmy to climb the tree, and he climbed up to the tree, and Jimmy was afraid of heights, so he wouldn't go up the tree. He wouldn't go up, and so they teased him and teased him, and so finally one day he went up and sat down on the limb, and it was it was at supper time. Mom and them called out for the boys to come to dinner. Dan and the other boys took the ladder and left Jimmy up there. He got hit. He got hit with the sled the one time, the second time, and the first time I think they were playing football, and he broke his shoulder bone. I did mine. I think each one of us had a turn at our collarbones. My mother never knew when one of us was going to come in with a broken bone. He had a horse and buggy. Yes, that's how he made his house calls. Doc Hufford. He rode all over the countryside, doctoring people at the horse and buggy. He never did end up with a car. Yeah. I fell and broke my wrist. I fell off of the side of the hill at school, and that's about all I did. Anna Grace hurt her back, and Ethel, she scalded herself with making seafood taffy. Wow. She spilled it on her, and she also went through a window, her arm. So it was these sort of things that Mom had to tend with, but she never seemed to get upset. She just took it with her in just like, well, it's time for dinner. Oh, no. We didn't have water. We had a pump outside, and it was such good water. It was really good water. It was always cold, but yeah, it was one of the old-fashioned iron pumps. And when we did laundry, we had to pump that water to do all the laundry. Yeah. It had the outhouse. So you know what an outhouse is. Well, and we had a country store for the groceries were. We had a church was right almost in our backyard. It was up on the bank in the back, and we had a drugstore that was over on past the church, and that's all there was there. There wasn't any businesses of any kind. It was just country. When I was 15, the lady, the couple that owned the store, they tried to help us all they could. And she called, and we owed them for groceries. We owed them like you wouldn't believe. And Mom gave them as much as she could. And she called Mom one day and she said, "Do you think Helen would be able to come up and work for me in the house, come up and make the beds and dust and that sort of thing?" She said, "And I'll pay her $2.50 and I'll put $5 on your bill." And so Mom, she didn't like the idea, but she said, "Well, yeah," she said, that sounds good to me. She's trying to find a way to pay it, you know. And so I went up to work for her, and I did. I made the beds, and I dusted and went over the house and did what she had asked me to do. And one day she said to me, she said, Helen, she said, do you know how to bake? And I said, well, yeah, I think I could. And she said, well, do you think you would be able to bake me a white cake with white frosting? And I said, well, I think I could. And so she got all the stuff for the cake, and I got all the instructions from Mom. I knew what she did. I knew how she made them. I watched her many times. So I went ahead and I baked the cake. And then I put boiled icing on it. That's egg whites and syrup. I put that kind of frosting on it. And the first time they ate it, she said, that cake was delicious, you know. So every Saturday after that, she asked me to make her cake. And it made me feel good that they turned out. See, when I was working for her and I got that money, I saved it. I saved it in a drawer, and I said I was going to go shopping after I saved up enough money. So I was 16 years old, and I finally decided it was Easter, it's coming Easter, and I decided I needed a new outfit. So I was going to go shopping to McKeesport, which was several miles down the river, you know, from where I lived. But I could take the bus and get the bus and come right back. So I took what money I had and I went shopping. And I found, I'll never forget it, I found a plaid skirt and a pink top. It was pink plaid, and a pink top, and a pink felt hat, and pink gloves for what money I had with me. First outfit I ever had new. And I never forgot that. And then after, when I was almost 18 years old, when I was 17, 17 and a half, I guess, Mom moved from El Rama to Clairton. She got an apartment. And so I, in the meantime, had gone out to Large, PA, and I interviewed for a job. And I'm with two of my friends that I grew up with, and we all got hired in this convalescent home for children. And it was such a nice job. And they had a nurse's quarters for us. You know, we just moved in and then went from there to the hospital. And I stayed there for quite a while, and I think I left there, and I took a job in a restaurant, and I stayed in the restaurant, and I saved my money from there, and I was trying to better myself, and everything went well. When I was in the restaurant, I baked a pie. Well, first of all, they had hired my mother to bake pies. And then Mom got tired. She said, it's just too much for me. She said, I can't do that anymore. And so she told the owner that I knew how to bake pies. And so he said, well, you go ahead and bake the pies. So I did. And I had people stop me on the street and say, oh, we just love your pies.
Oh, that's great.
And I worked there for quite a while. And then I left there, and then it wasn't too long after that until when I was 20, I got married.
Uncle Dan and Dad met each other in the South Pacific.
Yes, they did,
in the
yeah.
Marine Corps. And
Yeah.
I think Uncle Dan gave Dad your picture,
Yes, he did.
and he asked if he could look you up when you got back, and the rest
Yeah.
is history.
That's how it went.
Yeah.
Yeah. He came home, and we left, we went down to his sister's in Kentucky and got married. And then he went down to North Carolina to Cherry Point, to the Marine base, and then I followed after when he found us someplace to live. So we went down and we were Southerners for a while, but we weren't welcomed. They were just the lady that he rented from. I couldn't believe her. She didn't have anything. She had the bed. She had the bed in there, and she had a little stand and she didn't have a chair up to it, like a dresser, and she didn't have a chair up there. She had a little barrel for me to sit on. And the longer I was there, the more I found out that this wasn't an apartment that was, well furnished. We left there. He started looking right away for another place, and he found this place with this elderly couple, and they treated us like their own kids. And he took us to up to Wilmington, to the auction to sell his tobacco, and it was just a plantation. They had cattle and all kinds of things, and fields of cotton and tobacco, and it was just a huge, place. And their kids were all gone. They had all left home. But they treated us really good. When I started to cook for me and Ed, I wasn't considering, I was copying what my mother did. So I made vegetable soup.
For 12,
She made vegetable soup for
for 12 people.
I kept adding it, and then I'd run out of a pot. I needed more room. I kept more. I went downstairs to her, and I said, Mrs. Mallard, I said, I hate to ask you, but do you have another pot? And she said, Helen, what are you making? I said, vegetable soup. She said, well, how much are you making? I said, well, I'm making it like my mother did. She said, oh my goodness. So when it was all done, I had enough to feed an army, and that's what she told me to do. Put it in jars and I'll give it to the help, The people were out there butchering their hogs and so on. And so she took the soup out and gave it to the workers. Yeah, we all had scarlet fever, and we were quarantined. We were quarantined. Jimmy took the scarlet fever, come down with it Christmas Eve, and then from that time on, then one after the other kept coming down, and so they had to up the quarantine and up the quarantine after each kid got it, and I forget how much school we missed. We had our books, and we could get the studies to try to keep up. But I don't remember that any of us was that we didn't fail or anything. So, but that scarlet fever was bad. And Mom, she tried so hard. She had sheets up at the door and everything, trying to keep the germs out. But when you have that many in the house, it just didn't work. And well, it was the same way within all the children's diseases, measles and everything. We all got the whooping cough. We all had the measles. Well, it was a busy life. I had just came home from the hospital with you when the war ended. It was 5 days. I was in the hospital for 5 days, and they didn't want to let me go because I'd had terrible problems. But they left me go home, and so he was, his dad got home when he was 5 days old. So they had said he wouldn't be able to get home, but he did. So yeah, they were blowing the horns and church bells and just so what a relief, Well, and then we left Grandma's and went up on Patterson Hill in our little 4-room dream house. And I mean in 4 little rooms. And it had a bathroom. Of course, when we were with my mom in town, they had everything. They had electricity and bathrooms and everything. Yeah, we moved to Patterson Hill and life went on. He was 5 years old when we moved up there. Well, I have to say, everything has changed really considerably. And when you think the cars are unreal, unbelievable, and the airplanes, that is the most outstanding thing. And all the transportation, even your homes today, everything is so much bigger and better, and and the way of life is so different. People had money back then, and the people that had money were one group type people. And then you had the middleman, which was what we were considered middle class. And then you had the low class, and the low class were really low. And that I think that has stopped more or less to a point. You still have the low class people, but they aren't suffering like they did back years ago. I mean, if you didn't have anything, you were scrounging around for an existence, and you don't. I don't think you see that. I don't see that as it was back then. When I forgot to say, when we were near the railroad, about when the Depression hit, all those men that were working in office buildings and everything, they were hopping freights and traveling to try to make an existence. They had nothing. And they used to stop at our house. They'd get off of their freight trains and come to our house for food. And Mom never had a lot of food to give to them, but she never would let them go hungry, no matter how many of them came. And she always had a lot of bread and jelly and peanut butter, and whatever she could give them, she gave them. And I know this one gentleman came, and Mom said she knew he had been a businessman, the way he was dressed and everything. And she said, and I remember the day that he was there. We were home from school for lunch, and we were all around the table in the kitchen, and he knocked on the door, and Mom answered it, and he said, "I was wondering if you could spare me something to eat." And Mom said, "Well," she said, "it won't be much, but yes," she said, "I can give you something." And he looked at her and he said, "Are all of these yours?" And she said, "Yes." And he said, No, ma'am, you will not give me anything to eat. I couldn't take anything from you. No way." He said, I won't. I don't want your food. You need it to feed your kids." And Mom, she tried to talk to him, again. No, he said he absolutely refused. He wouldn't take anything from her,
so others
Well,
didn't know that
they
you
marked the
lived.
houses where they could get food. They marked them. They marked the houses. Yeah, and there were a lot of them. There were a lot of them because where we were located, the trains weren't going very fast. So they could get off without any trouble. They hopped the freights and rode the rails. And they're still doing that today, somewhere, you know. Oh, a favorite movie. Yeah, Sound of Music. That's a tester too, you know. And another good one was, I don't know if you remember or not, Giant. Do you remember Giant? It's with Rod
Not,
oh,
not Rod Taylor.
who is it?
Robert.
Who is it? Giant. But Elizabeth Taylor was his wife. And he was from Texas. He owned half of Texas. It was a good movie, but she had to adjust to his way of life, you know. I've always felt that the good Lord will take care of you if you ask Him and you live a life that you deserve it. I feel that that's a good way to go, but you also you have to have a goal. You know, you have to have a goal as to where you want to go. And like when we were first married, we had to. His dad. He went. He was the type of person that like that snap of your finger, he made a decision, and he stuck by it. So he was out one day, and he came home from work, and he said, "I want to take you for a ride." And I said, "Okay." I said, "Where?" He said, "Well, I just want to take you for a ride. I want to show you something." And I said, "Well, okay." He said, so we get in the car, and he starts out. He said, "I bought a house." And I knew he didn't have a nickel in his pocket. He did not have any money. He said, "I bought a house." I said, "You what?" He said, "I bought a house." And I said, You have to be kidding me. How could you buy a house? You don't have any money. Well, I bought a house. So he takes me, and he said, took me up on Patterson Hill and showed me this little four-room house. It was empty. It had been lived in. It needed cleaned up. And he said to me, now, I went to see the, went to see the owner. What happened was, my sister and her husband had bought a lot to build out in the country the area where his parents lived. And so they were going to build a home out there. So his dad thought, well, I'm going to go out there and see what's out there and if I can do anything. So he found out who they went to, this builder. He owned a lumber company, lumber thing, and so he decided well, he was going to go talk to him and see what he had to offer him. And so he did, and Mr. Lorimer said, well, son, he said, well, what do you have to back you up if I do anything, if I come up with anything? And he said, well, I don't have anything. He said, that's why I came to you, thinking you might help me. And he said, I'll tell you what. He said, I have this little 4-room house. He said, I'm going to take you and let you look at it. And so he took us up to see the house. And he said, now I'll tell you what I'm going to do. He said, I'm going to lend you the down payment on this little house. And that will cost you $10 a month until it's paid off. And then he said, we'll carry it, the rest of it in a mortgage. So that's what he did. And I think our mortgage payment was $46. No, I feel that the good Lord led me in the right direction. I really do. We had some rough times. And we got through it, but I wouldn't trade it, because it was an experience that everybody should go through, because life isn't a bed of roses all the time. And we had some rough times. We didn't always have what we wanted. I mean, any extra things. But I'll tell you what we did do. First of all, before we bought the little house, we had rented a little 2-room place in Clairton. And we stayed there for a short time. And then we went into the 4-room house. And that gave us incentive to he never stopped. And he always said, we're going to own a brick house. We're going to own a brick house. And the little house we had wasn't brick, it was wood. So guess what?
He bricked it.
He wanted to brick it. So he started bricking it.
Yeah. Amazing things.
He never. So then this house that he bought was wood, wood frame house. And then after he worked on that, he added a garage and he bricked part way and put a brick wall along the side and the porch and
A fireplace.
worked on it
fireplace and chimney.
constantly. He put in a family room downstairs, bricked the walls downstairs, the family room, rebuilt the kitchen, the cupboards, took all the cupboards out and rebuilt them. So that was his way. That's what he wanted. He always said he wanted a nice brick house. So we ended up on Dorman Drive after that, after the 4-room. We sold it and we bought a house. The builder built the brick house for us. And it was nice. It was a nice, it had a 3/4 of an acre. Yeah, nice basement. It was well built. So, but no, I wouldn't, I couldn't say that I would change anything. It was, you tested your strength.